I feel like Walter Cronkite. It's day 31 of the government shutdown, and things are moving. Things are starting to change. Welcome to the National Briefing. My name's Kelly Nash, and as I had said yesterday, I don't know if I'd call it a prediction. It was more of a hope, but Donald Trump has returned from his Asian getaway, where he just got his billions and billions and billions and trillions of dollars in trade. And he said, this is what he posted on Truth Social late yesterday. Now we are in power, and if we did what we should be doing, it would immediately end this ridiculous country-destroying shutdown if the Republicans are not using the great strength and policies that made available to us. By ending the filibuster, the Democrats will exercise their rights, and it will be done the first day they take office, regardless of whether or not we do it. He's absolutely right. Donald Trump wants John Thune and all of leadership on the Republican side to end the shutdown. They're going to do it because Donald Trump is telling them to now. We're going to use the nuclear option. When will it happen? It looks like Monday at this point, although, because that's the next time they're back in session, although it could be an immediate, let's get them back in today. It could be over the weekend. But I think no later than Monday do we see the Republicans use the nuclear option, which is fantastic news for all Americans. Now, let's get out ahead of the story that this is the government shutdown in a nutshell. We want health care for illegals. Okay, they say it's not illegals. You know what? Let me just take you back to 2010, actually 2009, Barack Obama, his very first joint session of Congress, talking about how it doesn't cover illegals.
The reforms I'm proposing would not apply to those who are here illegally.
That was South Carolina Congressman Joe Wilson. Joe Wilson had read the bill. I know Joe Wilson personally. He had spent basically 3 days reading the Affordable Care Act, and he saw it in there that they were being covered. By the way, he did apologize later on to Barack Obama personally. But no, Barack was lying to you. That's lie number one. We're not going to cover illegals. And by the way, right now, we've got the CBO analysis talking about with the big, beautiful bill, how many illegals will be taken off of it. So the CBO acknowledging it. I don't know why these Democrats, well, I guess because that's all they can do is lie. Anyway, so that was lie number one. Illegals are not going to be on it. Let me take you now back to 2013. We're in the Wayback Machine, and it's the Jake Tapper Show.
So here it is, by popular demand, the number one lie of the year, based on something the president first said in 2009 and then updated in 2013.
If you like your health care plan, you can keep your health care plan. What we said was you could keep it if it hasn't changed since the law's passed.
So this was a runaway favorite with readers. 59% voted for this as lie of the year.
The editors of PolitiFact selected this because it had the most impact on the national debate. It's something we first flagged back in 2009 because we knew back then not everybody would be able to keep their health care plan. And this was the year that it was proved false as these cancellation letters went out. Well, what happened was the president came out later and said, oh, well, you never said that. We said that if your plan hadn't changed since the law was passed.
That's not what he said.
We found 37 separate instances where he said clearly with no caveats that you could keep your plan. And that got the pants on fire rating, that excuse.
All right, so there you go. There's lie number two. It actually wins lie of the year a few years later. Also in 2013, this is at the University of Pennsylvania, where they're going to be talking with some of the architects of the Affordable Care Act, a.k.a. Obamacare. And this is how the whole dang thing is introduced.
The title here is The Role of Economics in Shaping the ACA and How Economics Can Inform the Inevitable Mid-Course Corrections.
Again, 2013, the inevitable mid-course corrections. What we have passed, we already know can't work, and it's already failing in 2013. That's 12 years ago that they knew the thing was a disaster. They actually knew it when they passed it. How do we know that? Well, let's go to Jonathan Gruber. Now, if you know him, you might know him because he is He became legendary, actually, during this period because he started telling the truth about the Affordable Care Act. But the reason he got on the healthcare map was back in 2003, he started working with Mitt Romney and convinced Mitt Romney to pass what they called Romney Care in Massachusetts, which is what Newt Gingrich said, we ought to look at that maybe on a national level, which got the whole Obamacare thing rolling. You've screwed up big right there, former Speaker. Mitt Romney learned his lesson. The Massachusetts healthcare reform thing, that was a disaster. By the way, Jonathan Gruber also further went on after the passage of the Affordable Care Act, which is not single payer. He actually, that's the ultimate goal, is single payer, meaning the government is the single payer of all your healthcare. And he got it passed in Vermont, one of the most liberal states in the country. Obviously, Bernie Sanders represents Vermont. Anyway, that was passed in 2011. By 2014, it had gone bankrupt, and they no longer have the single payer in Vermont. But let's go back to Jonathan Gruber talking about the mandate problem in 2013.
The only thing to go wrong would be for a Republican won Ted Kennedy's seat. And what's the odds of that? Well, a Republican did win Ted Kennedy's seat, which meant we couldn't go to conference. So we had to basically live with the Senate finance bill. And what happened there was the Senate finance bill was a great bill with a very large mandate penalty. And the night before it was voted out of committee, Olympia Snowe, who was Republican, so didn't like anything that smelled of taxes, and Chuck Schumer, who, as far as I can tell, doesn't understand economics, got together and said, we ought to lower this mandate penalty. And so they put an amendment before the committee to lower the mandate penalty, and who's going to vote against that? It's a single amendment. So it passed, and the mandate penalty got shrunk down.
I'll agree Chuck Schumer doesn't know anything about economics, but the fact that they did not want to penalize Americans even more, and you say that was one of the problems, Jonathan Gruber. Okay, let's talk about lie number 3, the Cadillac tax, and how this is a designed thing to help Americans.
John Kerry, or more likely his staff, came up with this very clever idea of the Cadillac tax. So it's good in the sense that it's going to have a lot of the same effects, in the sense it's a 40% excise tax that happens to people with the highest marginal rates. What's wrong with it is two things. This is actually penalizing insurance purchase for lower tax rate people. But it's worse than that, because the Cadillac tax isn't deductible from corporate income. So actually, it's effectively, so what that means, you have to raise the price more than 40%, so that the revenues you get, you can account for taxes. And when you work out the dynamic logic, it's more than 100% tax, actually. You know, I hate to speak ill of it, because it's better than nothing, but it really is not, it's not a Pauli-like removal of the exclusion. It's actually just really a ceiling. No one's going to have insurance that costs more than this, because it's more than 100% tax. But my hope is that as it gets to 2018 and people focus on the fact that this is really a very draconian tax, we can then reopen the discussion about doing the more rational thing.
Okay, so again, 2013, the architect of Obamacare, or one of the main ones, is telling you that what we're doing is hurting Americans. And so this is the answer to people like Bernie Sanders who say, how is it possible in the richest country in the world, which, by the way, we're not, we're the biggest debtor nation, but in the richest country in the world, that life expectancies have dropped. How is it that healthcare is not better? You just answered your own question right there. The Cadillac tax made it impossible for people to get the health care coverage that they were getting before Obamacare. If you're old enough to remember what insurance was like in 2000s, the early 2000s, the 1990s, you remember it was very easy to get to see a doctor, and it was very easy for them to run tests that they thought were appropriate, and so on and so forth. It's not possible today. You don't have these insurance premium. The plans are not available because you penalized people at 100% tax. You just heard the architect explain the problem. All right, let's get on to the final and probably the biggest lie. This is the most egregious lie. How did you actually get this boondoggle disaster of a bill to pass?
This bill was written in a tortured way to make sure CBO did not score the mandate as taxes. If CBO scored the mandate as taxes, the bill dies. Okay, so it's written to do that. In terms of risk-rated subsidies, if you had a law which said healthy people are going to pay in, it made explicit that healthy people pay in and sick people get money, it would not have passed. Okay, just like lack of transparency is a huge political advantage. And basically, call it the stupidity of the American voter or whatever. But basically, that was really, really critical to getting the thing to pass. And, it's the second best argument. Look, I wish Mark was right. We can make it all transparent, but I'd rather have this law than not.
So 12 years ago, Jonathan Gruber's explaining, first, the American voters are stupid, and they must have been. They went for the Obamacare. Two, we hid a lot of things in there, knowing that the Americans were too stupid to understand it. If you remember, Nancy Pelosi at the time famously said, well, we'll have to pass the bill to find out what's in the bill. And that it can't sustain itself. It's unsustainable. He was saying that in 2013. The Democrats have not lifted a finger to try to help this bill or help this law actually do anything to help Americans. Americans' health care has gotten worse and more expensive every year since this thing was passed. And this is what they're fighting for right now. This is the reason that single moms on SNAP and WIC are not going to be able to have food this weekend. This is why people in the military are going to miss paychecks. This is why the air traffic controllers are not getting paid even though they're working. It's so that Democrats can save a bill that they lied about that is actually hurting Americans.